Welcome to the Scuttlebutt on 89.1 KNSJ Descanso, San Diego's only military radio hour, with your hosts, Maximus and Van, bringing you news, stories, and interviews from and for the military and veteran community of San Diego.
What's up, guys? Maximus here. Welcome back to another very, very exciting episode of the Scuttlebutt Show. I'm here with Joe Musselman. Joe, how's it going?
It's going great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. I got to say, right off the bat, for anybody who's listening, this is maybe the guest I've been most looking forward to ever having here on the Scuttlebutt Show. Joe is, I met you because you were the CEO, founder of the Honor Foundation, which, we talk about on the show all the time. If people listen, they already know what that is, but we'll definitely get into it. And now you've moved on. You're still involved with that, but you've moved on to another. I don't know if I would say bigger. It's definitely bigger in a way. I don't know if it's better. We'll let you answer that because that's your journey, right? And talk about what you're doing now with venture capital. So, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. I'm super excited. Beside myself, really. Thank you for sharing some time with me.
Yeah, of course, Max.
And let me just first give you the opportunity. I'll ask you the question that you taught us all how to answer, which is tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. And thank you for asking me that question. So to start, through my work at the Honor Foundation and working alongside the community itself, my why is to light fires so others can see. And the moment you figure that why out, the moment you figure out the not just your mission in life, but what excites you and fires you up to get up every single day, nothing feels like work, nothing feels like an obligation, and your days you don't lose track of time, you lose track of weeks, you lose track of months. And so to tell a little bit about myself, let's start where it matters most. I was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, to two Italian-American parents, both first generation. And they instilled particular values from the start: accountability, responsibility, imagination, and mostly my childhood. I didn't grow up lower middle class, and I didn't grow up with very much money, but I grew up always feeling wealthy. I always felt like I was loved. I always felt like I was cared for. And I think a lot of folks can go back to that time in their life and they pull things from those childhood experiences that really shape and define them as they move into the adult phases of their life. And for me, it was a lot about creativity. It was about building. It was about making other people feel special and most importantly, being a good brother, son, and family member to my immediate family, extended family. I had a huge extended family. So I grew up in a very start-up feeling environment, chaotic, messy, loud, frenetic, Italian, exactly, dude, exactly. And so I've always gravitated towards those types of environment because I feel at home. So I don't think that even in my own transition from the Navy into THF into Fathom Ventures, I don't feel like any of those things were transitions. They've always felt like a homecoming to me. And in that regard, growing up in Chicago, a big city, loved it. Spent a lot of time on the East Coast as well growing up. I attribute a lot of my, I should say, like my want and need to create and to build and to compose things. I attribute a lot of that to my early, I grew up playing classical violin, and I went to music school for about 10 years. And that was a very formative time in my life and where I really learned a lot about other people coming from different places, backgrounds, and that to me has really left a stamp on my life. So anyways, music school, Chicago. I went to DePaul University in the city of Chicago. I wanted to go to a city institution. I wanted to grow up in those years watching people go to work and do things and build things, and taking the L train to work every single day was inspiring to me. And it was that was also a big part of my intro to entrepreneurship. Got heavily involved with 8 on-campus organizations from first year to last year, and was very involved and engaged with the entrepreneurship community there at DePaul University through the business school and through undergrad. And then the journey began of going into the United States Navy, which is a crazy story in itself on how I even got into the idea of becoming, of pushing myself to try to become a Navy SEAL.
So the motivation to join so you're a Navy veteran, and the motivation to join the Navy was to join the Navy, go to Buds, become a SEAL, and do some time or a career in the Navy.
That's right.
As a special operator, right?
That's right.
But that isn't how it went.
No,
right?
No, it is not.
So can you kind of, as much as you want to share about that,
of course,
kind of tell us that journey of so you leave Chicago, or I guess you didn't actually, you stayed and went to boot camp.
Yeah, that's true.
and then came out to San Diego. Tell how did that go? The military experience.
Yeah, so I was inspired in a unique way. First off, I grew up seeing every uniform of every branch of every service in every closet of my home growing up. I was the 16th man in my family to serve in the United States military, dating all the way back to World War II and even before that. I've had family go inside of every conflict, from Operation Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, to the Korean War, to Vietnam, and all the way back to World War II. So I grew up with that being installed in my childhood, of seeing boot camp photos and memories being shared around a table, all about military. So it's been a huge part of my upbringing, huge respect for the flag and our service members. And I come from a family of nurses and military people and teachers and social workers. So service is embedded in the DNA of not only my immediate family, but also my extended family. I had an opportunity in 2005 and 2006 as a civilian to go to Iraq and Afghanistan. They were civilian deployments, quote unquote, through the Department of Defense and Department of Army, and it was basically, for me, the objective for me was to do research for my senior thesis at DePaul University. However, I was at a very forward operating base, and that's where I met, up in the mountains, and that's where I met my first Navy SEAL. When I met this individual, it was like in the chow hall, and again, it was a really deeply embedded fob. So small, tiny. It wasn't anything developed like a Bagram or a huge base or anything like that. And I got to know this guy, and we just started talking. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know where he came from, but he was just all bearded out, and he was wearing his own clothes, and he was rocking his own gear. And I was like, who is that character? And then I asked around and started to ask other questions, and then eventually, the group of folks came back and asked who I was, like, why are you asking questions about those guys? And then I quickly became, myself, and was like, hey, my name's Joe Musselman. I'm studying here. I'm here on a civilian tour. I'd love to talk to you guys more about what you do. And they all kind of looked at one guy, and then I'm figuring, okay, well, that's the guy that's either going to say yay or nay, and it turned out to be the chief, right? And the chief's like, yeah, cool. Like, I think they were checking down on me to make sure I'm not some clown that's going to be asking their...
Because, that happens all the time.
Totally.
Like everyone's, fascinated with getting in and kind of knowing the inside scoop with what's going on with those guys.
100%.
And you already made it out to this base, forward operating base, which, if you don't know, what Joe's describing is where you want to be. You don't want to be on Bagram or like one of the big, they would call them flagpole bases. The further out away you can get from the flagpole, the better of an experience you'll have embedding into the country that you're deployed in and experiencing the people and the actual war fighting element.
So it was intense. And so I was offered to sit with the chief for a bit, and he was completely inspiring. Told me some crazy stories. He showed me some video that happened over the summer where, some bad guys literally just came running out of the mountains towards the FOB, and they really didn't stand a chance. But seeing and hearing the way they were describing conflict and contact, there was nothing happy about it. There was nothing braggadocious about it. There was nothing, it was very, this is our work. It's serious work. And we're proud to be here doing this work here and not at home. So the way they talked about it, the way he was, pulling in stoic philosophy and talking to me about war fighting and battle, and I was just inspired. So I came home with that experience and said, withdrew an OCS package from the Marine Corps. Sorry, Marine Corps. I'm sorry, Poppy, my grandfather. who rolled in his grave for sure when I walked down the hallway of the recruit depot and went enlisted into the Navy with every intention to become a Navy SEAL.
So you joined the Navy, you came to Coronado, right, and you were in training, and that's kind of where the path changes for you into what ultimately became the Honor Foundation, right, and you getting out and starting a nonprofit. So what happened that kind of corrected your path from where you were at to,
That's right.
to where
Yeah.
you ended up? What was the thing that happened? And then I want to get into talking about how you kind of found your next purpose, right?
Sure.
To continue to serve.
Sure. Great question. And it really was the beginning of something remarkable and exceptional in my life. I'm a Christian, and I know that there's a joke in there that says you want to make God laugh, you talk about your plans, right? So at that point in time, I'm going through training. I'm in it. It's exciting. Like, oh my God, we're here. I'm with my class. We're classing up. All is good. And the next thing you know, flash forward a few weeks into the first phase of training, and I suffer a pretty wicked spine injury, and it's irrecoverable from the Navy perspective to come back into training. Hard stop, veer right, left. I don't even know what to do at this point. There is no plan B. You don't kind of want to become a SEAL. You're either in or you're out. I was all in. I had no plan B. I didn't know what was next for me. And most importantly, I had to step back and look at all the people that I love and that I cared about, that I came into the Navy to serve alongside, bittersweetly continue their success. And they're all on the teams now, and they're doing wonderful things all over the world. And doing crazy work on behalf of the United States and our citizens, and I had to watch them move on in training while I was left behind. That was really hard, and certainly went through bouts of depression. Certainly, that was a real thing. I'll always take that so seriously now when people say or hint that they are feeling depressed. I know what that's like. Your body feels like this immovable weight that you can't even get out of bed. And when I had that it was an opportunity, and it was a career. It was a correction, an opportunity to correct my path. And that's where I met this Master Chief. And the Master Chief story is pretty powerful. He served 26 years in the SEAL teams. He spoke multiple languages. He had been around the world. He had been to 60-plus countries. He has 6 Bronze Stars, all with combat valor. He could fly fixed-wing planes. He could fly rotary aircraft. He had a master's degree. And he was a 6-0, and this is like by the way, he was a 6-time Ironman. So freak of nature on paper, right? And I was working inside of an office at the time, and he came into that office and he said to me, hey, like, what are you doing in here? And what are you up to? And we became very close friends, and he invited me into his retirement ceremony that I went to, and it was one of the most moving experiences I've ever seen. He gave an unbelievable forward-thinking talk on women in the teams, on innovation in the teams, on technology in the teams, and how we have to compete with our enemy and stay 10, 15, 20 steps ahead of the game at all times. And it just moved the whole audience to tears. The next day, he walked into the office that I was working at, and he looked at me straight in the face. He closed the door behind him, and he said, "Joe, 26 years in the teams, what am I going to do now?" And he was crying. And when I heard and saw that, like any patriot or American, period, you look at that and you're like, how can I help, right? Like, you want to help this patriot. There's no getting around it. And it was simple stuff. Well, Master Chief, like resume, career design, like who are you talking to? Are you networking? And it was like deer in headlights. So I said, here's a problem. Here's someone I can serve right now. So let's do that. And I helped him with resume. I helped him with career design. I helped him get into some networking opportunities, introduced him to some people, and I became addicted to that feeling of support and service, that this person could look to me for help. And this person has been serving our nation for 26 years, and now he needs our help. And why isn't there anything here to help him? How is there nothing here that exists to help and support this person? That was the beginning of the Honor Foundation. And you experienced that program, and flash forward, we have nearly 20 staff. We have 3 physical campuses across the country for all exiting SOF to attend a program that's 15 weeks. We have a virtual program now. We've raised millions of dollars, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families from the special operations community are now experiencing what I like to call a seamless transition into the next great adventure of their life. But it all came and stemmed from that particular failure. And to me, I just don't believe in failure. You're just getting course corrected into another outlook and opportunity to change the world. So that was my opportunity to show a particular attitude, pick myself up, and I can still be value to this community that I wanted to be a part of. Here we go. Let's do it.
I wanted to share something with you. Ever since we had a guest on our show named Jackson, who owns a company called Black Box Safety, and he does like OSHA type supply and manufacturing and distribution for companies all around. And his motivation for starting that company was he was a Marine, and as a young Marine, I think as an E3, he was doing a ruck run, trying out for Force Recon, and running. He had some stress fractures in his leg that I think he knew about, but never saw treatment, didn't want to stop training, ended up with a large femur open fracture on his leg,
man.
Massive damage done, irrecoverable from a military perspective, like you were saying, and he ended up getting med-sept from the Marine Corps after this. And he said something to me during that show. He said, when I think about, like, I never went on deployment, I never made it with those guys. Those were my buddies. That's all I wanted to do. And then I didn't, I never did it. Like I ended up getting med-sept. And he said he always felt some kind of like guilt, like a FOMO type guilt about that. And I said, I get it. He said he never felt like he lived up to other veterans who deployed. And I said, I get what you're saying, but I don't agree with it, because I have zero doubt that if that injury didn't happen, that you wouldn't have been there alongside those guys. There's no question that you would have deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, done your, put your life on the line, took every risk.
Sure.
That's why you got the injury, is because you're not somebody who sits on the sidelines and doesn't do it. So, and you're the same way. But it sounds like I know that you live a meaningful life. It sounds like you had a different outlook on it, where you, I'm sure you had things that felt like you missed out on, but that you took that as a course correction and you just, repurposed. And for anybody out there who might be in a similar situation, there's tons of examples of people who you just can't control those things. They just happen. You shouldn't feel bad that you tried and that happened and that injury happened or whatever it was. You did everything that anybody could ever ask you to do, So there's like nothing for Jackson out there. There's nothing to feel guilty about. There's no doubt in my mind that you would have done everything. And there's no difference. Some people go on their first day of deployment and get blown up by an IED and killed, I have no doubt. And some people do 6 combat deployments, 10 or 15, to me, it's all the same category of person that you are. Your character is not in question, So anyway, I just wanted to let you know that's what I think about that.
Thanks, man. Thank you for saying that.
There's no question of character on that, or willingness to serve.
Totally.
Selfless service.
Yeah, there's 2 big things that happened that gave me unbelievable validation, that I continued to serve the community to the best of my ability, despite not being able to be serving in the community, right? One came from the Force Master Chief of the SEAL community, which is a big deal. It's the senior most. I mean, you know this, right? But for the audience, if you are the Force Command Master Chief, you are the senior most enlisted Navy SEAL on the planet. And to have that in the enlisted side, basically meaning that, there's the officer side, the enlisted side. This is the senior most officer or senior most enlisted person in the SEAL community. And he said to me, Joe, we're so lucky as a community that you got hurt, because the Honor Foundation is impacting lives of this community more than you ever could have as an individual operator. And please believe me when I say that. And when I heard him say that, man, that was one of those moments that, you put on your chart, you remember for the rest of your life. It helped me shape my own why, and it was just a big deal. And then the other story is of a 4-star, again, another Navy SEAL, so the senior most officer, SEAL in the world, said something similar to me, and they said it with such humility, like they were actually serving me in some way, like meaning like it was the humility was pouring off of them. It was the most genuine comment I've ever heard anyone pay, and it made me immediately want to somehow do more for them. Like, how can I do more for the community? And that, to me, that reeks of servant leadership in the best way ever. And getting those two compliments from those two people, all that made me want to do is work harder and impact more people and get after it harder for the community, because their leadership, look at how their leadership leads. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget those. I get goosebumps up and down my body thinking about that. And that's the fuel. That's the fuel that like throws onto to ignite and to light fires so others can see. Like I felt the fire coming off of them, of servant leadership onto me. And I'm like, oh God, I hope to be like you when I grow up, quite literally. And their touch was, everyone has this image of Navy SEALs, big, brute, door kicking. And yes, they are that, but they also have this genteelness about them and the world. And that comes through seeing real shit in the world. You think they're these war-hungry dogs. That it's so opposite from that in so many ways. So anyways, those two moments were big for me.
That's a good point. I've talked about that before, that the strongest, most aggressive people I've ever met in my life, like warriors, also have shown the most compassion.
Yes.
At the same time,
Yes.
And when it's from when you've experienced war, when you've seen real evil exist in the world, it makes you want to protect others from that, and you feel kind of that empathy towards people. It changes how you kind of view everything. More empathy, more sympathy, more compassion for what people are going through.
I'm actually like skeptical of people immediately if they start talking about war fighting in a certain way, almost like it's fun, or almost like it's completely detached from what it actually is. When I hear people talk about that, I immediately put into question, like, what did you actually do? Right?
Yeah.
Like, what did you actually do in the military? Because I know a lot of people who have done a lot of things, like just things that will never leave you, right? And they don't talk about it the way that you are talking about it right now. And to me, that goes for business as well. It's kind of that, I love that American Gangster line where he goes, the loudest person in the room is the weakest person in the room. And when you apply that to the warfighting scenario, the person that's bragging about warfighting, I always wonder if he actually
war fought.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that's 100% true.
Yeah.
100% true. Or to what extent? Like,
right.
Did you take? Yeah, I'm not trying to put anybody down, but there's definitely people out there who, maybe they've been on Bagram, right?
Sure.
And took IDF.
Sure.
And now they're out there in the grunt style shirt talking about,
right.
the crazy war in Afghanistan.
Right.
Not to take away from your service, you were there, but maybe you're overselling it a little bit. Maybe you have some of that FOMO type guilt, and that's how you're portraying it. I think that there's a lot of that too.
Yeah.
And then of course there's some people out there who are just committing straight up stolen valor, like
that's right.
trying to make themselves seem like something that they're
that's
not.
Right.
All those things exist.
That's right. And to your point, that is something I've always gone out of my way to say, that I wanted to become a SEAL. I did not become a SEAL. It turns out I was designed to serve the SEALs. And that's the pathway that it took. And I'm so proud of that. Not that many people get to say they've served that community. Like, there's something elite about that in my mind. And I always say this in a very vulnerable way, like I had just the right amount of a chip on my shoulder that really propelled me to make THF something really big and beautiful for the community, because I was seeking validation from the community that I did not get to be a part of. And so that there is something to entrepreneurs when you think about it. And I still even feel weird. It's weird. I don't even feel like calling myself an entrepreneur. an entrepreneur because that's such an earned title. It's kind of like the Trident, right? You have to earn that every day. It's like I might have been an entrepreneur back in the day with THF, right? But now let's see if I can be an entrepreneur again with Fathom Ventures, right? You got to earn that again. You got to make it a success again. And looking back, every entrepreneur, they typically do have this chip on their shoulder, and they are trying to solve a really tough frickin' problem in the world. And I want to be a creator. I want to build things. So let's go prove it again. And so THF was a big learning experience for me. I'm a completely different person, leader, advisor, coach than I was 7 years ago when I started that. The community has helped me grow up very quickly, and that's what I hoped it was going to do as an operator and even as a non-operator through osmosis and being around a community of leaders. It's been remarkable, the change that I've seen in me on the inside out. My wife has seen in me. My family has recognized the change in me. And so that's my hope now, to bring this concept of servant leadership into the venture capital community.
Can you give a brief explanation in your own words of what servant leadership is?
Sure.
For our listeners who maybe haven't ever been in that situation in the military?
Sure.
I mean, everyone has, whether they know it or not, but maybe people who got out as like E5, E4,
Sure.
maybe you never achieved a level of responsibility over people where you experienced it in a way that you might be talking about right now. So can you kind of just break that down?
Yeah. And I the definition it varies through what lens you experience it, but I can give you three quick narrative stories. One is, you don't need to be in a leadership position to be a servant leader. I don't think any servant leader actually thinks of themselves as a leader until all of a sudden they're running a multi-billion-dollar company, and it was their attitude along the way that actually got them there, which was servant leadership. Mother Teresa is a big influence in my life. Her memoirs are super powerful. So if anybody wants to get knocked on their ass from someone who is the epitome of servant leadership and read the sacrifice that goes into serving the poorest of the poor all over the world, read her memoirs. And she felt guilty. She felt selfish every day because she would pray to God saying, like the work I'm doing makes me feel so good. Am I doing what I'm supposed to do for you, Lord? Because all this work is making me feel so good. Should I feel this good doing this work? And am I serving you in the right way? I hope we all get to be selfish as Mother Teresa has been selfish, right? And she has a famous quote that talks about you don't have to serve thousands of people. You just have to serve the person in front of you. And you have to help one person at a time. And for me, thinking back, you can connect the dots in hindsight. I just was focused on serving that Master Chief. That's it. I had no idea it was going to then turn into 1,000+ people that we've helped and supported throughout their career transition. But that one person led to that mission. Helping one poor person led Mother Teresa to serve hundreds of thousands of the poorest of the poor all over the world. So taking that concept into servant leadership in mind is, you don't need to be in a leadership position to be a servant leader, number one. It's an attitude that grows over time. And then I'm going to steal a quote from a person who has literally wrote the book on servant leadership, which is, it's not about being in charge. It's about caring for those in your charge. And that attitude, when you do get to a management level, it's not about managing people. It's about managing experiences that bring out the best in people. And so when you think about servant leadership, it's funny, for 7 years, all I did was give everything I had, from a network perspective, from a leadership perspective. I had to muster up skill sets that I didn't have, and I had to learn and draw from the community that I was serving to really properly lead. I didn't know. I always joke, the first Google search I did in starting THF was how to be a CEO. Like, who knows how to do that? Like, I went from being, a college educated, but E3, deck seaman in the Navy, to then trying to be a CEO, and I say trying, emphasize, triple star, underline, emphasize trying. I didn't know. There's no CEO handbook, right? It's doing and relying on your skill sets to get it done. So I picked great people to follow and people that I admired, people that aren't with us any longer, and then people that are currently with us today. And I just tried to emulate and lead through their example as my example. But servant leadership is about truly and genuinely doing all you can for someone else. Doing all you can for someone else. That goes for marriage. That goes for business. I don't even see that there's a separation between personal and professional life anymore. There shouldn't be. You shouldn't be a person at work and then a different person at home if you want to be your whole self all the time. So anyways, that's it's a long definition for servant leadership, but it's really on you to take ownership of leading, to lead others to become their best self. And that's your only goal, is to lead others to become their best self. To me, that would be a definition of servant leadership.
I think I share a similar philosophy, and I say this not here on the Scuttlebutt Show, but privately in my private life. I mean, my personal life, I guess I should say, like with my friends and everything, with my wife, that I hate seeing people are it's easy to be critical of government. It's easy to be critical of big organizations, big companies, right? Sure. That's what I describe as like soft targets of criticism, because you can blame them for your problems with no resolution. You know, you can blame them for the problems in the world.
That's right.
With no resolution.
That's right.
But instead of focusing your time and attention on a big organization or big government, if you see something in the world you don't like, you as an individual can make a much bigger impact by walking outside and doing something good.
That's right.
Than you can by hating the man or whatever it is.
That's right.
This faceless person, intangible object that's causing all of your problems in your life. Yeah. It doesn't do anything. Maybe you can vent on it, place the blame, but you have the power to fix it if you just go outside and make the world a better place.
That's right.
And you're small, just like what you just said, you start with one person without the intent to save the world.
Right.
But look what came from that. Look, everything that we've talked about and are going to talk about came from trying to help one person, right? So
that's right.
Your description of it and the Mother Teresa anecdote is spot on to what I believe personally.
Absolutely. And also back to, again, Steve Jobs said this in that famous Stanford address, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backwards. And I talked earlier in the show about my mother and her, she would have this 3-word phrase that she would say to me all the time, and it would irritate me and frustrate me. And of course, as a child, I didn't understand the impact that it would have on the rest of my life. But whenever I would begin to complain about anything, or if I was grounded, or I was taking timeouts, or which I was taking a lot of timeouts, I was angry that the school called home about my behavior in class, or whatever it was, he's speaking up again, all those things. All she would say to me is, Joe, who can change that? Who can change it? Who can change it? And I used to get so angry with that, but it infused this level of self-accountability that she was right. Like, we have we can't control what other people are doing or how other people are feeling. All we can control is how we respond to it and the actions we take from it. And we own that response. That was one of the best learning lessons, is who can change it? And that will stick with me for the rest of my life. And also, too, there's a great author that I've come to know personally, professionally. His name is Jordan Peterson, and he wrote a great book about the lessons of life. And he talks about cleaning up your room a lot and cleaning up your house. And your house is a metaphor, your room is a metaphor for your life. And go through each individual room and focus on it, fix it, clean it, change it, and then go to the next room and do that. And the next thing you know, things are cleaned up. But it starts with self-accountability and responsibility. And now he has, millions and millions and millions of followers. And I think there is a sense that there's a message that we don't hear as much anymore. And that is around self-accountability. and that is about taking responsibility for your actions. And that was a table conversation that I had with my family on a weekly basis growing up. And I grew up knowing to take responsibility. And that goes right into, the foundation of like the next great adventure of my life that I'm hoping to make to hopefully make a success for millions and millions and millions of people. And all the lessons that I've learned, I always joke that it came from a nonprofit and learning from basically one of the most elite warfighting communities in the world, from teams, leadership, and culture, and what that means.
So the in case anybody's waiting for the answer of who can fix it, it's you.
That's right. Yeah,
you are the only person who can fix
right.
it. It's just like when you're searching for an answer, we're gonna get right back onto the Honor Foundation. But when you're searching for an answer
Sure.
to a problem, and like let's say recently shootings in the news, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like to get onto like political or hot button issues, but this is just a good example. The only person I haven't heard blamed for a shooting that's been in the news lately
has been the shooter.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%.
Yep.
That's right.
And
yep.
When something like that happens, in my mind, the place to start is the only person to blame is that person. Just like if anybody listens to Jocko podcast or reads Jocko Willing's books, Extreme Ownership, before Jocko ever put it into words, it's kind of something I always believed, and he put it into words better than I could ever phrase it, which is what I would say is, as far as I'm concerned, if I'm sitting down on a park bench and someone walks by and trips on a sidewalk, it's my fault because I didn't warn them. If I knew that there was a bump in the road and I didn't warn that person, they tripped, that's my fault. Because if I look at it any other way, I can't fix it. But if I look at it as it's my fault, I can take action. If it's the city's fault, if it's that person's fault for not paying attention, I can't fix that. What can I do? I can take responsibility and take action and fix the problem. And I think that's what you did with the honor. Okay, so that's what you did with the problem of special operations veterans transitioning and not knowing how to use their specialized and extremely qualified skill set to transition into their next mission and continue meaningful work on their next phase of life, right?
That's right.
So you started the Honor Foundation, started a nonprofit. How intimidating was that? That had to have been. How did you come to terms with believing that you were qualified to do it? And starting and telling people, hey, come to, I'll help you. Like, how did you come to be able to look somebody in the eye and say, I will help you?
Yeah, that's a great question, Max. And I've never been asked that question before. So thinking through those early days, right? There was this, again, the chip on the shoulder. I had a lot. I wanted to prove myself to the community that I could add value to the community that I meant to serve. But, you asked a really tough question, and it's almost like a combination of things. One, it was the fear of being perceived like I didn't have the skill set to support the community that drove me to earn a skill set to serve the community. So, and I got this flush of emotion when you said that, because I was driven by the thought that I don't have the skill set. Who am I, seriously, who am I to serve these folks? Like, I didn't have the skill set. I didn't have the abilities. I was a BUD/S medical drop retiree from the Navy who was kind of, in my mind, broke and leaving as an E3, having accomplished nothing that I ever set out to do, trying to start the country's first transition institute for Navy SEALs. That sounds ridiculous, right? Like, so when people say entrepreneurs, need to lie to themselves in some ways that it's possible. And I'll never forget one of the '06, the CO at the time, the commanding officer of NSW walked in. He goes, "What are you working on all the time in here? Like, what are you doing in here, like in this office?" Because I had charts and graphs and resumes. And he's like, "What are you doing?" I see all these guys lined up outside the office because I was supporting them with their resume. And I was like, "Oh, I'm building the first transition institute for Navy SEALs and special operators, sir." And he looked at me like, "Oh, okay, like, all right, young buck, like, good luck." And I'll never forget who that CO was, and I'll never forget, like, the face that he made after I said that. And 5 years, 6 years later, we created it. So, man, that's just such a great question, though. I want to say that I didn't have the skill set, man. I didn't have the knowledge. You can only get that type of knowledge through doing. There's no book. I always laugh to myself when someone gets a degree in entrepreneurship from undergrad or something. It's like, what? Like, that's a thing? Like, what are they? They're teaching you, they're educating you out of the creativity necessary to feel that need and to go and start something big and bold. I don't know. I'm hating on something. I've never looked at the curriculum. I'm sorry. Like, look, I'm a big fan of Babson College. I love that they have degrees in entrepreneurship and all that stuff. They're doing great work. But, man, I think to myself, 4 years of a degree, like, I created THF in 4 years, raised millions of dollars, impacted thousands of lives in 4 years. Like, that wouldn't have happened if I was in a classroom. So
I love that's kind of the answer I imagine you might say when I asked the question is basically the answer is servant leadership and
yeah, that's a good point.
Kind of humility, right? Humility, humble, servant leadership.
Yeah.
I think that's right on. I mean, the greatest leaders that I've ever had in my life in any capacity were the ones who, weren't full of themselves, weren't like overly cocky or confident that they had all the answers. Mm-hmm. We had a Jason Tushin and Jason Torrey on the show.
Yeah, of course.
And Tush said, a great leader is in love with the problem, not in love with their own solutions. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, that's a great, that's
great.
We get a lot of great, quotes on the show here. And that was one of the greatest.
Yeah.
Waking up every day in love with the problem, not with the idea that they have all the answers.
That's right.
Just hoping that the next problem comes and that they can take it on.
Yeah.
With the passion to do it,
That's right.
With the fortitude, the resiliency to take on these problems that never stop and are never the same. Mm-hmm. And that's what entrepreneurship is, right?
Yeah.
Every day it's a new problem. Every day you have to come up with creative solutions. And if there's one thing you don't need a degree in, for the most part, I guess, without really knowing what I'm talking about either, it's entrepreneurship. And I only say that because of the infinite number of examples.
That's right. That's right.
In the definition.
Just show me who's done it.
Yeah.
And I can do that. And it was that, they say, motivation gets you going, but habit gets you there. Well, if you make a habit of motivation, right, and I think it was one of the psychologists back in the day, it was like, motivation is like bathing. Like, you got to do it every day. And thinking of that philosophy with an early stage business and startup, and I also didn't treat the nonprofit mission like a nonprofit mission. Like, any mission, whether for-profit or nonprofit, the business should be run like a business. And I hired no people from nonprofit. I hired people coming from fast-paced technology backgrounds and companies and working in biomedical and devices and people that were very sharp and had a sense of urgency. So I didn't, anytime I heard, well, this is how it's done in the nonprofit space, I tried to do the literal opposite of that. And then we created a hell of a team and a hell of a board, and we were able to do something special.
So I want to get into so the Honor Foundation. I have some questions at the end about that.
Sure.
Some heavy hitters. I hope that's okay with you.
Sure. Yeah.
That I ask on the show all the time to all the guests. Things that I like to share. I like to ask questions with the idea that we're sharing things with the audience that will benefit them in the future.
Of course. Yeah. Great.
You're in venture capital now.
Yes.
What is that?
So venture capital we're an early stage venture capital fund. So we invest in companies from formation to A, meaning from the whiteboard stages all the way into bridging them into an A round of investment. from larger venture funds who focus on A-round investment. So we invest in early stage technology companies with enormous market potential, and we look at that investment through a TLC lens, which is what I've learned through THF. And TLC is very simple, right? The TLC of startups means teams, leadership, and culture. And every problem that I've heard working with startups now as an advisor and mentor for nearly 7 years, all throughout THF, I was on the board of the NASDAQ in San Francisco, the Center for Entrepreneurs there. And every problem that I was ever faced with, it all could be rooted back to something to do with teams, something to do with leadership, and something to do with culture and or lack thereof of all three. And so we focus on that as a fund, meaning the lens is very deep and it's very clear that when we sit in front of someone, am I getting the feeling of a missionary or a mercenary? Am I getting the feeling of a Mother Teresa or someone who is obsessed with their solutions and not in love with the problem? Like there is the feeling, and believe it or not, one of the leading investors from one of the largest venture capital funds in the world, when I asked him how does he know it's a great deal? He said something that you wouldn't expect from one of the best venture capital, from one of the most successful venture capital VCs in the world. He goes, there's a feeling you get like when you're watching a magician. And when you watch a magician, you hear about what he's about to do, what he or she is about to do, and you think to yourself, if they can pull this off, that would be magic, right? And listening to him tell that story, he goes, and his body was very gesticulate, and he was saying, when I get an entrepreneur that stands in front of me, and they give me their pitch, they tell me what they're about to do, and I say to myself, and I get this feeling like if he or she could do that, that would be magic. And he goes, first, it starts with the magic. It starts with the feeling. It starts with that idea that would be so big that you can immediately, as a visionary, think forward and be like, that would change everyone's life. Like everyone's life would change if this person made this a reality. So that excited me, hearing that type of story. And then the next part is the feeling of that TLC of is this person, do they understand, the definition? Do they have a definition for teams? Do they understand what leadership is? And if not, are they willing to learn about it? And then culture.
I hope anybody listening right now who's thinking of becoming an entrepreneur or has an idea is listening to what Joe's saying, because that's gold right there, right? Like you just described to me what big idea people should be walking into the room with, right? Like what makes you believe in them.
That's right.
Would have been, is it fair to say that so people understand, like Amazon, Apple, Uber, WeWork, the building we're in right now, they all at one point had a round A investment, right?
Of course.
So
yeah, of course.
So we're talking about the companies that you interact with every day at the highest levels at one point were these companies that you're describing right now.
That's right.
And that's something to put in perspective.
That's right.
What we're talking about
That's
here.
right. That's a great point.
The scale and scope of impact of the work potentially is, unthinkable, really. What are some things you've learned about people and about companies since you started doing the venture capital?
Sure. And like VC, I'll always explain VC the same way that I describe like doctors and the medical field and surgeons, because you notice we always say that, or we hear doctors say that they're practicing medicine, right? They're it's scary to think about, but they're practicing medicine. They don't know medicine. They don't do it's practicing. So VC is an art. It's an art form, and I'm still so early in the opportunity to have the opportunity to serve entrepreneurs. And I look at raising capital for a VC fund, almost the same way as putting logs on a fire for other people. So like the money that I'm raising, I have a stewardship responsibility to not only my LPs, but also to the entrepreneurs. I want to give them fuel for their fire so they can light the way for the world in whatever idea that they're working on. So, I mean, what I've really learned is how some entrepreneurs in the, probably hundreds that I've heard to date, it's so funny to me how they haven't sat down and thought of a definition for teams, what they want their teams to look and feel like, what they want their teams to act towards from a general core principle standpoint, like where, like to the physicality of their teams. Where do you want your teams located? To the geography, the inside, outside, remote. Like really think deeply about the relationship you want your teams to have inside your company. Same exact thing for leadership. Like what type of leader do you want to be? Have you defined that? Is it on paper somewhere? Are you working towards it every day? How would you define the culture of your organization now and then the vision of the culture of the organization 50 years from now? Everything comes down to TLC in a startup organization. Companies have lost billions of dollars. So like, for instance, if you look at the Uber example, right? Not calling anyone out by name, but that could have been spotted early, right? And it should have been spotted early. So what we have done is we have found the greatest leaders in the world, quite literally, the greatest leaders in the world who have been living through a TLC lens from the day they were born, man. And these are senior people coming from all types of elite backgrounds, from Olympic coaches to professional athletes, former, to some of the greatest professional sports coaches in all time, to the greatest athletes in all time, to Navy SEALs, to special operators. We have found a coaching cadre that has never been arranged before. And their only prerequisite to being involved to be a venture coach for Fathom Ventures, the only prerequisite was when I asked them about what they knew regarding venture capital, the only answer I would accept was nothing. They know nothing about it because I don't need them to know about VC. I need them to know about how to form great teams, leadership, and culture. And we've gathered this cadre together. And we've gathered a great partnership at Fathom, and we hope to form companies from the very beginning with the right integrity, the right character, the right drive and purpose from the beginning, so that when they become a billion-dollar company, my agenda with Fathom is to put character-driven and a fabric of integrity behind founders from day one that help guide them, so that when they are impacting the world with technology, which is eating up the world, there's character behind it. There's integrity behind it. There's purpose, and then there's a steward, this quiet monk-like character in the corner, kind of like watching and hoping and kind of like bumper bowling, right? Like he's acting as those lane gutters and pushing that entrepreneur in the right direction, because right is always right, wrong is always wrong. And what someone does any of the time, they do all the time. So what we need them to do is start doing the right things from the beginning. We can help form that. We can help curate that experience.
Joe, thanks for sharing all that stuff with us. I think it's been my honor to have you on the show today. Thank you for sharing your time with us. I'd love to sit down with you again. Sometime soon.
We'll finish up the second half of the Fathom journey.
Yeah,
sure.
I'm sure there's a lot. And I just think it's really quick, worth noting, if somebody's listening on top of all that, in addition to TLC, after that being the core principles that guides you, then you put in the work and you have the good idea and you get the results, right? Like for somebody listening who's starting a company, you then have to follow through and actually create and produce and be a company too. So thank you again for joining us on this episode of the Scuttlebutt Show. It's been really fun. And you've shared gold with us, and this will be available online today.
Sure.
Immediately.
Sure.
And we'll have you back maybe in a month or so.
Sure.
When I'm back in town, I'm hitting the road for a few weeks.
Yeah, I'll update you on the progress of everything.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Joe, very much.
It's been an honor to come on here, Max. Thank you for having me.
The honor's mine. Thank you.
All right, brother.